welcome as we travel in the wake of the Vikings. Join us as we journey above the Arctic Circle aboard the Silversea Silver Endeavour as we travel from Tromso, Norway to Reykjavik, Iceland. This series will be presented in 5 parts, starting in Norway, moving further north to Svalbard, Norway, and then dropping down to Iceland for Part 4. Part 5 will be all about the Silver Endeavour, including a ship tour, a suite tour, a dining and drinking guide, as well as whatever entertainment we found, the Silversea difference, and lastly, the pros and the cons of this particular cruise. This story begins, as most do, at the beginning. And at the beginning, we will talk about Tromso, Norway, Skarsvag, Norway, and head on toward the Svalbard Archipelago, cruising first past Bear Island. Our journey began aboard a Finnair business class flight to Helsinki, Finland. Finnair seemed to be a good choice, and the ride was comfortable, with plenty of room in the business class area. Look to Part 5 for more about Finnair business class. We sit down in Helsinki about 9:15 in the morning to find, at least in the airport, that it is always Christmas in Helsinki. We had about a 6-hour layover in Helsinki, so we decided to spend that time in the very comfortable Finnair lounge on the non-Schengen side of the airport. This lounge actually has a working sauna if you have the time and the inclination to take advantage of that. There is also plenty of food and drink available of your choice, including beers and wines. But since it was 10 o'clock in the morning, more beer went down the drain than down my throat because of this steadily dripping tap. And before we knew it, we were back in the air headed towards Tromso. The descent into Tromso gave us our first hints of the rugged landscapes and scenery that we would be enjoying shortly. We were very quickly on the ground and through the small terminal and on to baggage claim, where air tags hiding inside of luggage at least indicated that our bags had indeed traveled with us. Collecting the bags and moving on outside, we were greeted by Silversea staff, who promptly placed us in a taxicab with another Silversea solo traveler, and we headed to the Hotel Aurora. Once again, greeted by Silversea staff at the Hotel Aurora, we made our way to our room, which, surprise, surprise, was ready and waiting for us, and found it perfectly adequate for our one-night stay. The room was a little on the Spartan side, but I figured, hey, we're in the land of the Vikings. Spartan was fine as long as it was clean, and it definitely was. Gazing out the window at Tromso, we decided it was time to do a bit of a walkabout. The hotel was only steps from the fjord, so we went a Viking, or exploring to everyone else. Tromso is distinctly a mix of the old and the new, and is the 12th most populous city in Norway at close to 80,000 inhabitants. It is also the largest municipality in Norway above the Arctic Circle, and the 3rd largest population center above the Arctic Circle anywhere else in the world. Tromso is 217 miles or 350 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, and is technically an island connected to the mainland of Norway by bridge and tunnel. As you walk around Tromso, you'll notice little bits and pieces of the Sami culture, as well as that distinct Nordic/Viking vibe. You will also quickly notice that Tromso is ruled by the seagulls. They roost everywhere, poop everywhere, and literally scream like a crying child, and at least initially cause uninformed tourists to look around for an injured child. The next day was Embarkation Day, and we had a bus to catch at around 11, but until then, it was another walk about Tromso. The indigenous people of this area, the Sami, have been present since around the end of the last ice age. Artifacts and even the foundations of Sami homes have been discovered and dated to 9 to 10,000 years in the past. Since Tromso is located on the North Atlantic Drift, an offshoot of the Gulf Stream, it is much warmer than us lowlanders would have expected. But because of its latitude of just below 70 degrees, it is subject to the interesting phenomena known as the midnight sun and polar nights, each lasting from 3 to 5 months depending on how close you are to either pole in whatever season you're in. And since it was summer in the Arctic, we were treated to 24 hours of sunshine. Tromso is a major tourist hub and attraction, but not so much in the summer, but more in the winter as tourists come in search of the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights. After our walkabout, we headed back to the hotel to hop on our bus and head for our embarkation aboard the beautiful Silver Endeavour. Arriving about 12:30, our room was almost immediately available, and we headed up to check it out, finding pretty much what we expect from any Silversea cruise: a spacious and accommodating suite, along with a welcome bottle of champagne, and, new to our expedition experience, our complimentary parkas, a pair of complimentary backpacks, and our rented boots. We took some time to unpack and watch the safety briefing on the in-suite TV, and then head off for the mandatory muster drill. Once that was out of the way, it was time for our sail away from Tromso. And as Tromso faded into the distance, it was time to change for dinner and explore the ship a bit. Check out part 5 for our report on the Silver Endeavour. That will include a ship tour, a suite tour, and the pros and cons of this particular voyage. Eventually, we made our way to the observation lounge, deck 9 forward, and enjoyed some canapes and before-dinner drinks. The observation lounge is a great place to watch the world slide by, in this case, as we glided down the fjord on our way up the northern coast of Norway towards our next destination. Dinner tonight would be in the grill on deck 5 aft. The grill is actually part of the pool area, but during the restaurant's operating hours, the pool is covered with a hard plastic-like cover that essentially turns it into one large dining room. The grill operates buffet style for breakfast and lunch, but in the evenings becomes a sit-down a la carte style restaurant. The next morning brought us to Skarsvag and the northernmost part of Norway proper. Before anchoring near Skarsvag, we were supposed to cruise past the Svalbard Islands to observe the wildlife, and we may have done just that. However, the fog in the area was so dense that there was no way we could see those islands if we had passed by them. We anchored near Skarsvag around 0800 and finished gearing up in the mudroom for our first ride aboard a Zodiac. This was to be what is called a dry landing aboard the Zodiac, where instead of hopping off into the water, we were able to step off onto a floating dock. Once at the dock, we would have a short orientation and briefing from the expedition team leader, reiterating what he had spoke about the night before in the briefing, or issuing any updates. In this case, once that briefing was finished, we walked up on shore, boarded our bus, and headed off towards the North Cape, purportedly the northernmost point in Europe. That distinction actually belongs to a small cape next to it that juts nearly a mile further out into the sea. The North Cape, or the Nordkapp, is generally recognized as the furthest accessible northernmost point in Europe. The huge and well-equipped visitor center has elements of museum, theater, shopping, restaurants, and a bar. Very civilized. This display of birds found in the area was interesting, including the Arctic puffin, among others. There was even a few old-fashioned dioramas to give us a glimpse of what it used to be like on the Nordkapp, a small chapel, the grotto, which was an unusually ambiguous space that was possibly a theater or a light show or a gathering place or whatever. A Thai museum representing the accomplishments and contributions of Thai seafarers who once explored the area. And a shopping area replete with the obligatory trolls. In a showing at the theater that grandly showed us what the landscape should look like. I've combined the theater footage with some stock footage that I found on the internet that you can marvel in here. Because in actuality, this was the reality of our situation. On a clear day, the view is said to be spectacular atop the 307-meter cliff. Because of the fog, we had to literally wander around the top of the cliff looking for the monument marking the northernmost point of Europe. Lucky for us, the cliff edge is well defined and fenced off to prevent short-sighted tourists like us from falling to the bottom of that 307-meter high cliff. The North Cape is home to perhaps millions of puffins, gannet, and cormorants, of which we of course saw none. Boarding our bus and proceeding back down the mountain, the fog began to actually lift as we made our way towards a Sami summer camp. As we neared the camp, several sightings of reindeer were made. The Sami are the indigenous peoples of the northernmost reaches of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and have literally been in the area for over 10,000 years. They are mostly nomadic people that follow the reindeer, from which they derive a variety of things, including food, clothing, and tools, as well as a source of income. The Sami continue in their established way of life, with their own language and a rich cultural tradition and art that stretches back those 10,000 years. This is a traditional Sami house that years ago would have been made of reindeer skins. To the Sami and their reindeer, we boarded our bus for the short trip back to Skarsvag. The small city of Skarsvag has a current population of 40 to 80 inhabitants, depending on who you talk to at any given time. And it has the distinction of being the northernmost fishing village in the world, sitting 315 miles or 507 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. While it used to be a thriving fishing village, most of it is now dependent upon ecotourism and wintertime sports, as well as tourists searching for the elusive northern lights. Once our day in Skarsvag was finished, we jumped aboard our trusty Zodiac and headed back to the ship. First order of business for the afternoon was lunch in the restaurant. Check out our complete dining and drink guide in part 5 of this 5-part series. For lunch and dinner, although the menu selections are rather limited, the menu choices do change every day. And if you still want to indulge in a dessert after lunch, there is always the Arts Cafe. As we watch the last Zodiac make its approach and get stowed away on the ship in readiness for our departure from Skarsvag, it was time, of course, for dinner. And for dinner tonight, we would return to the restaurant, to a menu completely different from our lunch menu. And after a satisfying meal at the restaurant, it was time to carouse around a bit and watch from the observation lounge as the sea slid by, en route to our next destination, Bear Island. Bear Island's official history begins after being discovered by Dutch explorers in 1596. It received that name after one of the explorers saw a polar bear swimming nearby. But currently, Bear Island has no bears inhabiting the island. In all likelihood, the island was found and inhabited by early Viking explorers during the Viking era, but the official history of the island begins in 1596. Once claimed by Russia, the island is now claimed and owned by Norway as part of the Svalbard Archipelago. While Bear Island has had commercial enterprises in the past, including such things as coal mining, fishing and whaling villages, and even a walrus hunting village. The only human inhabitants now on the island at this time are 4 rotating semi-permanent meteorologists working in a small meteorological station at the northern tip of the island. It was declared an important nature reserve in 2002, further limiting the approach of any vessels or encroachment by other human beings. We were supposed to closely cruise and even explore Bear Island, but weather and high seas prevented Zodiac landings or even the ability for the Silver Endeavour to approach closely. Later that evening, we attended mandatory safety and biological considerations briefings in the Explorer Lounge on Deck 4. The Silver Endeavour and her crew strictly follow guidelines set out by a guidance agency that governs what should and shouldn't be done in either Antarctica or the Arctic. Essentially, the idea is to leave the least footprint possible in either of those places and to observe and never interfere with the wildlife. Tonight we also had the captain's welcome party. The captain gave us a brief speech and then introduced his officers. Tonight was considered one of the 2 formal nights listed on the program as informal, where gentlemen were asked to wear a coat and tie was optional. This was as dressy as it got on this expedition cruise, and anything but flip-flops and shorts were perfectly fine for dinner. Tonight we had reservations which are required for Il Terrazzino, the Italian venue on board the Silver Endeavour. And although reservations are required, there is no additional upcharge for dining at Il Terrazzino. After dinner, and we were off to the observation lounge for an after-dinner drink and to watch the sea glide by as we cheerfully rock and rolled through the night on our way to Svalbard. Well, that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of this 5-part series. And if you enjoy this content, please do me a favor and like and subscribe and ring that notification bell to be kept up with new releases. Check out my website at tomsmultiinterest.com and stay tuned for more of this 5-part series and upcoming cruises and short travel videos. As always, safe and happy travels from T's Cruise and Travel Muse.